We recognize that the Hogan Administrative Center occupies the land of the Ho-Chunk people. Please take a moment to celebrate and honor this ancestral Ho-Chunk land and the sacred lands of all Indigenous peoples. Will the Secretary call the roll, please?
Ms. Bellman? Here.
Ms. Berkedal?
Here.
Dr. Cooper-Stoll?
Here.
Dr. Garcia?
Absent.
Dr. Jimenez?
Here.
Ms. Leahy?
Here.
Ms. Moots?
Here.
Mr. Korberg?
Here.
Mr. Spivey?
Here.
The quorum of the Board of Education is present, so the budget approval and levy certification meeting of October 24th, 2022 is called to order, and we'll now have the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could please stand and face the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Okay. Tonight's agenda has previously been distributed to the board with a motion by Mr. Korberg and a second by Mr. Spivey. We will approve the agenda unless there is a motion to amend. Is there a motion to amend the agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion has carried. We do not have any public speakers, and so we will turn to our information item, Act 99, Employee Benefit Trust Account Report, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Engel.
This is an item that comes before the board annually as a matter of state law, and I will turn it over to Ms. Sprang to explain.
So, as Dr. Engel said, we are required every year to present this to the board since we have a trust fund for employee trust benefits. So the first one is a benefit that is HRA associated, and then the other is a TSA benefit. As you can see with the first column with the HRA, we are practically fully funded for that one. We have an outstanding liability of $11 million, and as you can see, our ending balance is $12 million, so we're fully funded for that. However, the other one is, the liability is outstanding is $16 million, close to $17 million, so we have a ways to go to meet that. We have an actuarial study about every 2 years to update this, but it is updated annually, but our forecast is updated every 2 years. Is there any questions on this?
Any questions from board members?
When you talk about, just want to make sure I'm looking at the right thing, because there's some terms. So when you say liability, which line item is that?
It's not on
It's not,
here as
okay.
far as liability. It's compared to the ending balance is what I compared it to. So the ending balance as of June 30th, 2022, that means that's how much funds are in there to cover our liability into the future for that promise of that benefit.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
Mhm.
Other questions? Hearing none, then we'll move into the action portion of the agenda, which is the approval of the 2022-2023 original budget and levy. And I will turn over to Dr. Engel again.
Once again, this is a matter of state law. At this time, the board is required to set a levy for the upcoming school year, and I will turn it over to Ms. Sprang.
Okay, so you have in front of you a printout, but also if you want to open up the 22-23 original budget for the BOE, the Board of Education document, there you go. So this is in the format of the publication that we had for the public hearing, and I thought that this would be a good.
Is the one that you just held up, that
Oh,
one's just
this
a
one.
link? I don't see it. Oh, it's on the very bottom.
It's on the very bottom.
Very bottom. And it might be harder to tell on the printed one than on your computer, but I did 2 different columns, one for a successful referendum and one for an unsuccessful referendum. The highlights in green are the areas that have changed since our proposed budget. So we're going to look at the first attachment, and this provides the budget for the successful versus the non-successful capital referendum. So what changed for the proposed budget since we presented and approved the budget at the budget hearing? Well, we've gotten in the third Friday count. That is the number of our students that is associated with funding. So we are down 156 students in the seats and down 115 FTE for the year. This impacts the 3-year rolling average for funding, meaning that we get $1.6 million in declining enrollment for this year. However, we lose those dollars for the next year. So that sets us up next year for at least a $1.6 million deficit. It also, the 3-year average is decreased, and that decreases our per pupil aid, which is outside of the revenue limit. We're going to go through the packet of things that have changed in the budget book, but I just wanted to give you this introduction to how this affects the budgets and then the levy. So open enrollment in and out, we know those numbers right now. That is also associated with funding. We know that the 2022 TIF out tax apportionment of equalized valuation increased 14.19% within this district. And we will go into the detail also in the budget booklet. Our state certification of general aid, or sometimes referred to as equalization aid, is less than last year. And we all know that our revenue limit minus our state aid equals our tax levy for operating purposes. And also there was an increase in the private school vouchers. So how do these changes affect our 2022-23 proposed general operating budget? So about $358,000 more in revenue, but over $400,000 more in expenses. So the proposed deficit of $2 million is added about $113,000 to that. So we still have quite a bit of a deficit. Now, the debt levy. This is important for you to know that the revenue limit, the budget for the debt does not change the budget for the operating. So if our referendum doesn't pass, it's not going to affect the general fund. That's why I wanted to put it in this format, so you can see what actually changes for a past referendum versus an unsuccessful referendum. And then also, it affects no other levy in this whole list of levies. So the other thing that's changed is the community service fund. The levy has not changed. However, the revenues and the expenditures have changed since the proposed levy because we had a generous donation from the community, Crosse Community Foundation from Joe's Grocery Fund, and that is added as revenues and expenditures for each of our school districts that have a food pantry. So then if we go down to the bottom of the page, this too also points out quite a few things. First of all, it has the history here of the levy versus the mill rate. And as you can see back in 2021, our mill rate decreased by over $1. However, last year compared to the previous year, there was no increase or decrease. We were able to keep the mill rate the same. And then this year, as you can see in the column with the yellow, the proposed referendum impacts that mill rate by the 8 cents. However, if it doesn't pass, we're only going to levy for the current debt and not the levy for the debt that's going to be imposed by a successful referendum. So as you can see, there is a difference there in the mill rate based on the two different referendums, because that mill rate is composed of different levies besides the debt levy. Any questions on this part? Okay, let's go to the next packet, the pages from the budget plan document that have changed since our last time. So I have only a few pages printed out for you, so if you want to follow along on your computer for the updated budget book pages, and then we can go, the ones that I printed out have to do with the levy, because I want you to see those side by side. But the other ones have to do with the revenue limit in aid. And so this page here, remember that revenue limit is the capacity to offer services and programs, and that state aid and the local taxes are used to pay for those services within the revenue limit. So if you have an increase in state aid, it doesn't increase our ability to spend. However, it does lower the tax impact. So you might have heard, like on Alaska, they said that their tax impact is lower than they expected because they got more general aid. So remember that revenue limit might have stayed the same. However, they had more aid, less tax impact. We didn't have that same situation. So, but yet it is very close to what we predicted. $2 million less in our revenue limit compared to the prior year. And our equalization aid is down about $200,000 from the prior year. Any questions on that? Okay, this didn't really change on the next page, the revenue limit increase history. However, the impact of losing the students does. So that lowered our 3-year average. So when I talked about our declining enrollment exemption of $1.6 million, that's taking that $11,000 per student minus the loss of the 3-year average, which is $143, and that equals that $1.6 million loss in revenue for next year. So then the next one is enrollment history by level. So this is actually kids in the seats at each of the elementary, middle, and high school levels. I had predicted only a loss of 45 kids in the seat, and it actually ended up to be 156. It was quite the impact. So that is, also shows the graph and shows how it is declining at each level. So, next one. This one shows the same enrollment history, but it's by actual school and by level. So 79 students lost at the elementary level, 43 decline at the middle school level, and 34 at the high school level. It just supports what we've been saying all along. We have declining enrollment, and it's getting to the point of being very severe. Any questions? Just don't hesitate to stop if you have a question. So then we go to the open enrollment, and this has been a history of last year being quite even. However, this year we have more students going out than coming in. And the next page is actually showing where those students are going. Who's coming into the district by other districts, who's going out to other districts. I will point out that the virtual number way on the bottom has decreased as far as open enrolling out, because now we have a virtual school CRBA and we can accommodate a lot of those students in that manner.
Do you believe that there might be, and maybe this isn't the right question to ask at this time, but do you believe there's other accommodations that the school district of Crosse can make to retain students in our district?
Absolutely.
Yeah, when we look into open enrollment, the two factors that account for 75% of open enrollment they start 4K in another school district due to childcare concerns, or they move into our school district but keep their child in the school district they came from so they can be with their friends. And so 75% of the time, we've never had them in our school district in the first place. And so it's that's more challenging. For that remaining 25%, there is an opportunity, and I think strategies like opening up a Coulee Region Virtual Academy helps us attract those kids and retain them in our school district. But I think there's other unique things that we could do, and we do offer a variety of programs that aren't available at other places. And so I think that is a continual draw.
Okay, thank you.
So the next one shows the history of the class size counts and the averages. I will remind you that the averages for elementary do not include the PK, 4K, because they are not mandatory in the state of Wisconsin. So as you can see, the decline by grade level. The next one is the UW Extension Applied Population Laboratory. So this is our last population study that we had done. And what we do every year is compare our actuals to what they predicted at these three different types of projections. And as you can see, last year they projected more than we lost. This year it was less, but if you combine them, they're very, very similar in the last 2 years, almost 300 students. The next one is staffing to enrollment. So this is based also on third Friday as far as our staffing and our enrollment. Yes.
Sorry. Can I ask a question
Sure.
about the
Oh, sure.
projections?
Yes, of course.
Does that take into account an estimated incoming students, or is that just the projected, like, total loss?
That's the net.
The net, okay.
So then staffing to enrollment, it was updated with staffing as of third Friday. It does not mean that we actually have some of these positions filled, but we budgeted for them, mostly in the area of teacher assistants. We still have some spots to fill. So any question on the personnel or the staffing?
So it's been brought up a couple times, even while teachers were speaking earlier about the number of administrators in the district. Can we speak to that a little bit in terms of, I know people feel like, well, if we get rid of administrators, then somehow we'll magically find a lot of money and cover the debt and all that type of stuff, but can you speak to that?
Yeah, there's a number of ways to look at that. I think that when I talk to teachers in their buildings, they all greatly appreciate their building administrators who assist them on a day-to-day basis. I think sometimes the folks you don't see in person every day, it's harder to imagine what they do. We certainly need folks to help us put together budget books and things like this, so it's good to have administrators taking care of our finances and special education and community support services, but I think, some people don't see that on a day-to-day basis. Another thing that we look at to kind of assess where we're at in terms of comparability is how do we look like compared to other school districts across the state? And when we look at our administrative staffing ratios, we're in the 18th percentile or the 82nd percentile. 81% of school districts have more administrators per student than we do. So we're relatively lean compared to other school districts in terms of administration. But it's something that we're always reassessing and looking for ways to reduce our overhead so that we can invest in what matters most, which is putting good people right in front of kids every day.
And then the next one is the personnel summary, and it kind of breaks it down by employee group and the changes from year to year. And then the next pages were not included because they weren't ready when we had the proposed budget, but this one breaks it down by schools, by elementary schools, how many we have, people filling these positions as far as teaching staff and teaching assistants. And we also have then it broken down by other district teaching staff. So those are all teaching instruction that affects our children. Okay. The next one goes on to the operating revenues. They have not changed quite much since the proposed budget, just by the things that I did mention about our state aid and our categorical aid. So we have, like I said, about $300,000 more in revenue, but about $400,000 more in expenses. So kind of added to our deficit. So those are the next areas. So the revenues, of course, and then the charts and how they're broken down. And by function, meaning purpose, or by type. Any questions on those details?
I just wonder about the staff reduction, and now that we know we were off quite a bit by student numbers, are we already thinking about next year, what that might mean, or are we like not filling some positions now if they end up opening up? What's being done with that?
Yeah, we're continually in a process of evaluating when positions open up, if we need to fill them or not, and trying to anticipate for the future as well. There are certain positions in special education where we definitely need to fill those positions in order to assist students with their IEPs right now. And so it's really a case-by-case basis, but I think there's one or two positions at Hogan we've already not filled this year, and we've just been able to reorganize and shift duties in order to accommodate that. As we move forward into the next, throughout the rest of this school year, we'll be looking at how do we adjust for that budget deficit that we know that's coming. And so we'll have a process in place that'll involve a wide range of school stakeholders to kind of evaluate priorities and start identifying what comes next.
So maybe not just staff, but it could be buildings as well.
It could be anything, yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to have to look at everything to cover a $3.6 million budget deficit. We're going to have to consider all of the tools available to us.
Somewhat along those lines, I was thinking about all the folks that have came before us this year, before seeing this budget, and thinking about our teachers, and knowing that they feel devalued and, all those things that they've mentioned while they've come up, to this podium to speak. Have we factored in, I know that we wouldn't necessarily know what the, what's the word? I'm looking
CPI.
for? Yes, we don't know what the CPI is yet, but have we factored some form of a raise or an estimated version of a CPI so that we don't run into what we
You mean
did
for next year?
For next year, yes.
So we know we're looking at a $2.1 million structural deficit, $1.6 million from declining enrollment. So first, our goal is to get a balanced budget. Along with that will come in some assumptions about what we hope to give folks for raises. A 2% raise is about another $1.3 million. CPI could be 8%. It could be 4 times that. So if that's something that we wanted to provide, we would need a ton of state support in order to be able to get there with the revenue limit. Otherwise, it would have devastating impacts on our school district and our students. So we're going to do everything we can to attract and retain the high-quality staff we can and value them through compensation where possible. We're also facing a really challenging budget cycle with a lot of uncertainty at the state level in terms of state funding for education, which we won't know maybe until July of next year. And some known budget deficits that we have to address first. But that's always top of mind. The number one resource for our school district is the folks that are in front of kids every day. And so if we can keep the great teachers that we have, then our kids are going to learn. So that's definitely top of mind. But with no new funding for schools over the last 2 years, it's really a daunting circumstance right now.
Thank you.
Would it be accurate to say that the deficit we're facing is before we've taken into account other things as well, such as increases in utilities, increases in transportation, any of those things, right? So this number that we're talking about as a structural deficit is just what we are going to lose based on the revenues from last year. We haven't even looked into the details about every other bill that is due and that is required for us to ensure schools are operating.
That is correct. And that's why we're seeking structural changes, big changes to our school district to become as efficient as possible so that we're not spending on money on things that don't really have a direct impact on kids every day. And we know that that's the teachers that are in front of them. And so that's our goal, to become as efficient as possible so that we can really direct our resources where they need to be.
Thank you.
Okay, so the fund summary breaks it down then by each of our funds: general grants, special revenue, special education. I will bring to your attention the debt service on this page reflects a successful referendum. However, if that fails, we would change this page before it gets into the final document. All right, now, the next one is in front of you as far as papers. So we thought it might be helpful because these are on two different pages. So you have one that says successful referendum and unsuccessful capital referendum. If you want to just put them close to each other or to compare them, your revenue limit does not change in either one. It is that $2 million loss from the previous year. State aid doesn't change in either one. That's close to $200,000 loss from prior year. However, the total levy does change, and that has to do absolutely with the debt levy. And so you can see the change is either the gross levy rate is at $10.06 or down to $7.69. Any questions on these? I think the most telling thing probably is if you look at the chart and you look at the green line, and that is the total levy. So, of course, the total levy is going to go up with our debt, and it would go down without it. And that's kind of why it's a very opportune time to address this, because once it goes down, we'll never get this opportunity again to just have a little bit of an impact from the prior year for such a big project. The other one, any questions on this one? Okay. Then the next one I think I have, it says tax levy components history. I think I have two of those for you to look at side by side. And that is the past referendum has the gross levy rate, and the unsuccessful referendum has the other levy rate. So as you can see, the only thing that really changes here is the gross levy. Your general levy, operating referendum part, the capital fund, that's what changes. The the debt. So as you can see that. And then the community service stays the same, and prior year chargeback stays the same. Now, if we had an operating referendum in question, like some of our neighboring districts, this would affect our operating budget if we had planned for it for this year. So that is what I wanted to point out there.
So, Ms. Sprang?
Yeah.
Another way to look at that is if this box of $4.175 million of operating referendum, if that were to no longer be present, then our $2 million deficit would actually be a little over $6 million, correct?
Correct.
We would not be able to, let me say it another way. We would have to be talking about even more drastic changes on what and how we serve students if that operational referendum were to disappear.
Yes. remember that part of that operating referendum of 4.175, it provides our computers for our students, which need to be upgraded every so often too, so. So then, is there any question about those comparisons? Okay. And then this page on equalized value history, as you can see that the value has increased substantially in the district. You can see by each of the municipalities that support this district that all of them have gone up in their value. The second little graph down there is the percent that that municipality is part of our school district levy. And then the municipality equalized value changed. As you can see, each one of our municipalities went up quite a bit in value since the prior year. So then, here again, we have the apportionment of the tax levy. The past would be the tax levy for the municipalities that's shown in yellow, and the blue would show an unsuccessful referendum.
And I know, Ms. Spring, we've had a number of questions about the referendum stating Vernon County, the referendum question stating Vernon County, and here's where you can see we have two municipalities that do have, or that are part of the school district, and that's why the referendum question is as it is.
Yes, absolutely. And then the last one just shows a history of their value change over the last 20 years. And so these are the municipalities are listed in the largest to the smallest valuation in our district. So as you can see, quite a few of the municipalities have just increased in value over the past few years. Any questions?
I have a question. I don't know that it's necessarily for you. I'm just thinking as a board, what's the consequence if we were to hold off on approving this until after the referendum was passed?
We have no choice.
It has to be passed today.
It's state
That's
law.
why we're offering up two levies, so that the board can pass them both, pass or fail. Yeah, a budget needs to be approved today by state law.
Right.
Yeah, I can't even contemplate the alternative.
I don't want to.
So anyways, I just wanted to make sure you knew what you are looking at to approve tonight. As Dr. Engel said, you're going to approve two different tax levies, one based on a successful referendum and one based on a non-successful. The budget that you are approving affects only the debt levy budget or the debt budget. Remember that we expend on a fiscal year for our debt payments, but we have to levy on a calendar year. So that might not look like it coincides, but we have to make sure that we tax so that we have the dollars to pay any kind of principal and interest payments due in the next calendar year.
Any other questions for Ms. Spring? Okay, with that, there will be three motions we're going to be looking at passing. The first one would be to approve the 2022-2023 original budget as presented. Is there a motion to do so?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Korberg, seconded by Dr. Cooper-Stoll to approve the 2022-2023 original budget as presented. Are there any final questions on that before we vote?
Does approving this also approve the community service fund levy?
It does
No,
not.
that'll be
That's the
separate.
next item.
Next item on the
Well, I
agenda.
know it's next, but I'm just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, it
It's
does not.
separate.
okay, thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion has carried, and we'll move on to the second motion of approving the 2022-2023 certified levy in the amount of $60,480,670 in the event of a successful capital referendum on November 8th, 2022. Is there somebody who will move that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Ms. Leahy, seconded by Dr. Cooper Stoll to approve the 2022-2023 certified levy in the amount of $60,480,670 in the event of a successful capital referendum on November 8th, 2022. Any final questions? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion has carried, and then our final motion of approving the 2022-2023 certified levy in the amount of $46,220,670 in the event of an unsuccessful capital referendum on November 8th, 2022. Does anybody want to move that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Who is that? Okay. Moved by Mr. Korberg, seconded by Ms. Berkedal to approve the 2022-2023 certified levy in the amount of $46,220,670 in the event of an unsuccessful capital referendum on November 8th, 2022. All those in favor, any final questions? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion has carried, and we'll move on to our final action item, which is the 2022-2023 Community Service Fund levy, and turn it over to Dr. Engel.
This is an item that the board approves separately as it's in the sole jurisdiction of the school board, and I'll let Ms. Sprang explain further.
This has not changed since it was proposed to you in the early proposed budget.
Any questions for Ms. Sprang?
I don't necessarily have a question for Ms. Sprain. I think it's probably for Dr. Engel. We've had students come and kind of talk about the removal of the SRO program. I know that we've been through this and talked about contracts and all that stuff, but for just an update standpoint, where are we at with that program and the contract that we have?
Yeah, so the SRO program is something that's under continual review. So the report that the board accepted outlined a process where we would have a group of community members come in and provide oversight and feedback on the SRO program. It is a work in progress. We're still trying to identify the best indicators and ways to assess the program at this time. I think we're getting closer to things that are impactful in terms of measuring the effect of the program, but there's a lot that can change in that as well. Other things that came up from that report included restorative justice, and this budget includes an increase in restorative justice programming with the YWCA, as well as an increase in our partnership with the Boys and Girls Club to provide opportunities for after-school programming for students, particularly at Northside and Hamilton. So.
And just because I can't really remember how this works, but if we ever wanted to do an increase in the community levy fund to provide more supports, what would be the process?
We do that each year. So this one, I'm not quite sure if you were here, but this one was explained and increased in certain areas because we can only spend those dollars in that area for which we levied. So every year we go into that discussion with the board, usually starting in summer.
Yeah. No, I mean, not necessarily the line items on the community service, but like in general, a general
Sure.
increase.
Yeah, there would be an opportunity throughout the year if we want to sit down and make that a workshop item and talk about the programs that it funds and what the board's priorities are in terms of expansion or contraction, and something we can easily put on the agenda.
Any final questions? Hearing none. Oh, is there?
Is this a comprehensive list of all of the different community organizations that have contracts with?
It is not. We have contracts with a whole host of community organizations that are not funded through Fund 80.
Okay.
So it could be ESSER funds, it could be general operating funds, it could be grant funds. Anytime we start to share staff or programming, we try and get an MOU in place just to delineate the boundaries for, what they're responsible for, what we're responsible for, if background checks are necessary, if there's transfers of funds, how that's paid out. Lacrosse Promise would be an example of an organization. No, that's in here, actually, never mind. Yeah, there's a number of programs that we have with a whole range of entities that aren't included here.
Any final questions? Hearing none. Is there a motion to approve this?
I'll make a motion to approve the 2022-23 Community Service Fund levy in the amount of $1,290,000 as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Korberg, seconded by Dr. Cooper Stoll to approve the 2022-2023 Community Service Fund levy in the amount of $1,290,000 as presented. Final questions before we move to a vote. Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion has carried, and we have finished, so unless there's an objection, which I'm not hearing, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.